Welcome to Ridge Point High School. We appreciate you being out here tonight. We know that your lives are very busy. But I want to take a moment and welcome you. My name is Alice Ledford. I work for the district in strategic planning. We have some interpreters here this evening for sign language as well as for Spanish. If you are in need of Spanish translation, we have devices here, and I'm going to have our translator repeat what I just said.
Hola, muy buenas noches a todos. Si alguien necesita interpretación simultánea en español, por favor pasen a la mesa. Aquí tenemos los audífonos.
Thank you. So we're here this evening to talk with you about facilities master planning. I'm sure that you've seen a number of emails come out lately from Dr. Dupree. A video was just recently released. And our goal is this evening to engage with you all as our community members and stakeholders as we get information in order to make good facilities and program planning decisions over the next several months that will inform the development of our updated facilities master plan. So we have this evening with us Scott Leopold, who will be our primary presenter, and he's here with Cooperative Strategies. He has several team members with him, Alex Boyer, who is at the back, and he'll be helping as well, and two nice ladies as you came in, Ashton and Karen, who are here from their team. In addition, we have several of our executive team members here this evening. We have Mr. Steve Bassett, our Chief Financial Officer, helping check in folks for me. We have Oscar Perez, our Chief Operations Officer, and we have, who else is here? Long Pham here at table 10, who is here. Beth Martinez is leading this effort with me and Cooperative Strategies. She is our Chief of Staff and Strategic Planning. We have planned this evening to be here from roughly 7 to 9 p.m. We have a large portion of this evening is going to be table discussions because we really do want to get your input. And so we have facilitators, hopefully at each and every table that is currently populated to help make sure that we get the input from you. In addition, we have a questionnaire that you'll see a QR code on your table, and Scott will tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, but that's just another way of getting information from you to help inform us as we do our facilities planning with regard to both facilities and programming. All right, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Scott Leopold with Cooperative Strategies.
I got a mic. I'm good. All right, welcome. Just our agenda for tonight. We've got our welcome. I'm going to take us through kind of our process and timeline. I want to talk about the challenges that FBISD is currently facing with regards to facilities and programs. Like Alice mentioned, we're going to spend most of the time in a small group discussion, and then we also have that individual questionnaire that's on that QR code. The questionnaire is about, I think it takes about 10 minutes to complete. Sometimes we like to do a group exercise. We try to have you come to consensus on the individual questionnaire, but we're not going to do that tonight because we think it's a little bit too cumbersome. And so we have a pretty loose guided question that your facilitator at each table will take you through, and that's really going to be the meat of tonight's meeting, and then we're going to adjourn. And so I do not want to keep us here till 9 o'clock. If I talk for more than a half an hour, someone's got to boo me off the stage. I just want to start by kind of going through an overview of the plan. We started with a futures conference several weeks ago. We're still in the process of gathering background data, so we're looking at the facility condition of each facility, educational adequacy. We're looking at the enrollment data, capacity data, and also program information. We'll be using GIS throughout this process, which is Geographic Information Systems. And so we'll be able to visually represent options on maps and those types of things. Tonight is about educational framework. We're at this bar right here. And what this is we're trying to build the envelope that we're going to develop options within. And so tonight we're going to kind of talk about high-level issues facing the district and some possible solutions. We're not talking about solutions for specific schools tonight. We're trying to gauge your feedback and tolerance for some different types of options. And so we're talking about both programs and facility options. So we'll have that online questionnaire, which is already live and available now. We also have a term glossary in front of you that we'll talk about in a little bit more detail later. We'll take that feedback from this meeting tonight, and then we'll use that as a framework to develop options. We'll be developing options throughout the month of March, and we'll come back to the community again in the first and second week of April with actual options. We're talking about specific actions for specific schools. Once we get that feedback from the community again, we'll take it back to the committee. We'll make a recommendation to the superintendent. So that's kind of our high-level overview of the process. Profile of graduate, this is our guiding document for this process. FBISD exists to inspire and equip all students to pursue futures beyond what they can imagine. We've got copies of this at each table. I encourage you guys to look at it. We're going to have some questions on the questionnaire that are focused around fulfilling this. Steering committee. Can I have my steering committee members stand up? Not all at once. I want to just give these folks a round of applause. They volunteered to help us throughout this process. We've got 30 total members and 3 alternates. They were designated by the Board of Trustees and the superintendent. They serve as a district advisory committee. They consider the needs of all FBISD students. We're seeking out and evaluating feedback for this committee. We'll use the committee to develop master planning options. This committee will ultimately make recommendations to the superintendent. Our overall timeline, here we are, February 20th and 22nd with our community meetings. We've got more meetings with the committee in March and April, and then we'll be back here again April 3rd, 4th, 10th, and 11th to talk about those options. So what's the goal of this process? There's been a lot of information out there. Hey, I heard this is a rezoning process. It is not a rezoning process. It is not a rezoning process. It is not a rezoning process. This is the framework that we're going to lay. We may have possibly a recommendation for a rezoning option out of this, but that would not start until next year. We'd have to have a dedicated process for rezoning. So we would not have in any circumstances, any boundary changes in the fall of 2018. Worst case scenario, we recommend a boundary process next year, and those changes wouldn't be implemented until the fall of 2019 at the absolute earliest. So the overall goal of this process is to develop a robust and comprehensive facilities master plan that supports the profile of the graduate. We're going to develop options, collect feedback, and then ultimately make recommendations to the superintendent, and then take those recommendations for board considerations in May. Just to kind of give us a little bit of history, this is the results of our plan in 2013. And so we had 6 new facilities constructed. We had 6 additions. We had 8 major renovations, and then we had 53 other minor renovations throughout the district. And so kind of where we are now is to kind of pick up where we left off, because there were some recommendations that we had out of 2013 that just were not funded yet. And so we'll be revisiting those. Are these still necessary, or have we been able to address them in other ways? Just an example of this, we had a recommendation in 2013 to put an addition on First Colony Middle School. And out of the rezoning process that was recommended out of that, we didn't end up needing that addition. And so we'll be revisiting those kind of recommendations that came out with the committee and coming up with new ones. How is this one different? We've got a board policy now, CT local, that requires that the district provide an updated capital plan every 5 years. And our last major plan was in 2014, so here we are. This plan will continue, again, that progress made by that previous plan, but we're also going to take an increased look or more emphasis on programmatic non-capital solutions and maybe come up with some different ways to utilize our facilities. Purpose of this meeting, we want to engage in a high-level discussion about the challenges facing FBISD facilities. We wanted to discuss and determine tolerances for different types of solutions, both facility and programmatic, to address those challenges. In the feedback that we collect today, we'll define our educational framework as we begin to develop options. Glossary of terms. In each table, I think there's at least 5 or 10 different copies. It's a one-pager glossary of terms. It goes over some of the jargon that we'll be talking about today. As you go through the survey, there's actually hyperlinks on some of these terms on the survey that will bounce you to that glossary in case you're not sure what they mean. I'm just going to kind of go over some of the high-level terms that we'll be talking about that you'll have in the survey. Capacity. Capacity is quite simply the number of students that a facility can serve in permanent space. What does permanent space mean? That means it's the permanent facility and would not include any portable or temporary classrooms. And so everything that we're looking at as far as utilization and capacity is based on that permanent capacity number. Utilization is the percentage which is calculated by dividing enrollment by that permanent capacity. And so that gives us a percentage that tells us how well that school is utilized. Facility condition, this is the state of a facility's physical components. And so this is the bones of the facility. This is the windows, the walls, the HVAC systems, the roofing systems, the things that you don't necessarily see when you're in a classroom. Facility adequacy, or educational adequacy, sometimes we call it. We're calling it facility adequacy in this because we want to make sure that this has nothing to do with the quality of the teacher or anything like that. This is the physical adequacy of the facility. And so it's a measure of how well that facility can support the current program. This is quantified by comparing the existing facilities to the educational specifications. And so what the educational specifications are, and this is in your term glossary if you're following along at home, that's a document that defines how many classrooms a facility needs, what types of support spaces they need, how large they are. It's really a manual that a school system can give an architect and say, build a building to these specifications. And so we can measure adequacy by seeing, all right, well, does this old school have classrooms that are large enough? Do they have dedicated support spaces? Do they have a dedicated art room, or is art on a cart? So that's really the difference between adequacy and condition. Condition will tell us what in a facility is broken. Adequacy will tell us, hey, is it up to snuff to deliver that program, or is it present? Okay, so I want to kind of go through some of the key issues that we're facing. We have overutilized facilities in some places throughout the district. A facility is considered overutilized when its enrollment exceeds 120% of its permanent capacity. And that threshold is defined by board policy FC local. And that defines the acceptable range to be between 80 and 120%. Granted, when we're doing a facilities planning process, we'd like to get that as close to 100% or under if possible. Those are our thresholds. And I have here just kind of some examples here of what you might see as a result of overutilization. You'll see temporary classrooms, you'll see crowded hallways, those types of things. How does overutilization impact the quality of education? Temporary buildings may be required to house students. Additional lunch periods may be needed and added earlier in the morning or later in the afternoon. That's that old 10 to 2 we might be serving lunch. Student to teacher ratios may increase. Elective courses and enrichment classes may not have dedicated spaces. We'll have more competition for extracurriculars. More wear and tear on the facility. If you're running a facility harder with more people in it, those flooring systems and those lighting systems might have more wear and tear on them, and we might have to replace those systems earlier. On the contrary, we have underutilized facilities in other places in the district. A facility is considered underutilized when the enrollment is below 80% of the permanent capacity. And again, that's defined by policy FC local. And so we've got underutilized spaces, and we've got expense because we're heating, hopefully cooling, cooling these facilities that may not be fully utilized and have as many kids as a more well-utilized school would have in them. Again, how does this impact the quality of education? Additional funding may be required to support programs at an underutilized campus due to low enrollment. You may not have enough enrollment to support a full-time nurse or something like that. You may have to have those support people travel between more than one building to serve those students. Lower enrollment can also impact extracurriculars. You may not have enough students to field a team based on low enrollment. Support staff, again, may need to travel between more than one campus. And we'll have to have additional funding to maintain unused or underutilized space. And again, that's utilities and upkeep of the facilities. The next issue is the declining facility condition. And so again, I want to reiterate the facility condition. That's the state of a facility's physical components. We'll be talking about, throughout this process, the facility condition index. And this is a number that goes from 0 to 100, and it can even exceed 100. And this is a ratio that is the cost to renovate a facility divided by the cost to replace it. And so, you get in, God forbid you get in a car accident, you call your insurance company, and they give you a value to replace your car. And if the repairs exceed the replacement cost, then that vehicle is totaled. Well, we have the same thing with facilities. So if we go in and assess a facility and we see that Well, it needs a new roof, it needs a new air handling system, it needs new windows. Those costs can add up, and those can even exceed the cost of replacing the building as new. Again, major components that we have in a facility that we're assessing: a mechanical system, which is HVAC, or heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, electrical systems, plumbing systems, and of course our building envelope. How does declining facility condition impact the quality of education? We know that students perform better in climate-controlled environments, and when facilities are well maintained and kept up with, more dollars can be spent in the classroom. Our last one we have here is declining facility adequacy. And again, facility adequacy is a measure of how well the facility can support the current educational program or even future educational programs. Major components that we look at in an adequacy assessment: classroom size. Are the classrooms large enough? We might have some older buildings that have 600 square foot classrooms, which are 2/3 of what they need to be. Our specs usually call for 900 square foot classrooms. Presence of support spaces. Does the facility have collaboration or breakout spaces that students might need? Presence of program space. Does the facility have a dedicated gymnasium? Is there a combined cafeteria, multi-purpose room type of space? Furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Is the furniture age appropriate? Is the casework storage adequate? I've never had a teacher tell me that they had too much storage. Challenges of declining facility adequacy. Again, by definition, adequacy is going to have an impact on education. Because FBISD's facilities were constructed in different eras, we're going to have some disparity across the district. Newer facilities are likely to have those support spaces, larger classrooms, and be more adequate. Whereas older facilities that were constructed in eras where kids may have gone home for lunch and special needs students weren't served in those schools, those typically have less adequate spaces. So all these challenges that we have, how can we address these? And we kind of have two different tool chests here. We have our typical facilities options, which are we can create a new, we can construct a new facility. We can renovate our existing facilities. We can add on to our existing facilities, or in the case if we have too much space, we could do selective demolition, where we would knock down part of a facility. Some of the programmatic issues that we can look at program location. We can also, and when I say program location, I'm talking about anything, pre-kindergarten, ELL programs, academy programs. Per policy, FC local programs are portable, and they can be moved around the district based on space and need. We can also look at adjustments to the schedule. There's a question on the questionnaire that talks specifically to this. And when I'm talking about adjustments to the schedule, I'm talking about some things that are kind of outside of the box. We could look at a extended schedule, which would increase the capacity of the facility. So if we had a school that was open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., we could get many more students in there throughout the day. We'd have to have some flexibility in scheduling. We would likely have to have a block schedule, which is typically a 90 to 120 minute periods, fewer times per week, as opposed to our traditional 7-period schedule. Another thing that we could look at from a programmatic standpoint, we could look at split shifts. Not very popular, but you could perhaps double the capacity of a high school by having a 6 a.m. in the morning to 12:30 p.m. and then a 12:30 p.m. to 7 at night shift. You'd actually have to have 2 faculties in that type of situation, but it can be done. We can also look at year-round school. That can also increase capacity. And so those are just some ideas that we're trying to get some conversation about. And again, we have that information in the questionnaire, and we're looking for feedback on that. One last piece could be grade configuration. We could take a grade out of the high school and have a center for 9th grade or something like that. But those are some of those programmatic ideas that we're looking at to try to increase capacity without necessarily spending the dollars that we have in those facilities options. And so that's how this process is a little different. So how is our feedback from tonight going to be utilized? What we're going to end up doing is we're going to create a decision matrix. And so we have these thresholds as far as utilization and facility condition goes. And so we'll have our facilities that have poor facility condition or higher FCIs up here in this area. This is our marginal FCI range, and this is where we want to be. We want to get our facility conditions so that everything's kind of well maintained and on a schedule. And then we have our enrollment. We have low enrollment, less than 80%. We've got enrollment greater than 120%. We've got right in the middle where we need to be. Ideally, in a perfect world, we want to get every facility into this box. And so this is just an example of what this data kind of looks like when we plot a facility's condition and its utilization. And again, this is not Fort Bend data. This is just sample data to give you guys an idea of what we're looking at. You can start to plot these items on a box, and you can see where they fall. And you can see, all right, well, we have some schools here that are underutilized and they're in poor condition. Maybe we could, some of the options that we could come up with, we go back to our options over here. We could say, okay, well, we could do new construction, but since we have underutilized schools, we may want to look at maybe combining 2 of these underutilized schools that are in poor condition and maybe building 1 replacement school instead of 2. Those are the types of options that we'll be coming to you with in April. Okay, that's what I have as far as presentation. So from here, what we have, can I make sure every table has a facilitator at it? If you're facilitating a table, can you raise your hand? And if you're at a table that doesn't have somebody with your hand raised, can you stand up? Okay. Beth, Alice, can you guys help us work with getting some facilitators at those tables? Okay, you can put your hands down. For small group discussion, we'll have a steering committee member or staff member at your table facilitate this. It's a very simple question. We want to get your feedback on what are the challenges what are the biggest challenges FBISD is facing, both from a facilities and programmatic standpoint, and what are some solutions? We want to get your feedback and your ideas around this. That's the first piece of it, and I'd like to let you guys go. I'll check in with you at 8 o'clock to see where you are in those group discussions. And then after that, if you could take some time and fill out that individual survey with the QR code. We do have some paper copies if you'd like, but we'd like to encourage you. Oh, the pink one. You guys need the pink ones. Okay. There's pink QR codes coming around. Those are the ones that you're going to want to use. And they also have the link on there. And again, if you're overwhelmed by the questions that you see on there, you don't have to fill it out tonight. Take it home. It's going to be online until at least March 7th. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to raise your hand. And if your facilitator at your table can't answer it, I'll come around or Alice will come around and answer it for you. Thank you.